What is going on, everybody? Welcome in to a preview and prediction special of the upcoming 2025 NCAA Women's Basketball Tournament. We already made our preview and picks for the men's tournament as well as a live reaction. So if you want to go ahead and tune into that, if you missed out on it, that is going to be on our channel. But let's go ahead and get into our official preview and predictions of this women's tournament. But before we get into our actual picks, let's go through the number one seed. So we have UCLA, South Carolina, Texas, and USC. That last number one seed was between USC and UConn, and it ended up being the Trojans out of the Big Ten. So with that, let's go ahead and get into our predictions, starting with Regional 1, which features the number one overall seed in this field of 68, which features UCLA versus the winner of UC San Diego and Southern. I will have Southern, the Lady Jags, ultimately winning that game against UC San Diego, but falling to UCLA. UCLA has a lot of talent, led by Lauren Betts, and UCLA had a battle with USC in the Big Ten championship game. UCLA prevailed in that game, so UCLA is definitely going to be a tough out in this tournament. Now let's move on to our 9 seed matchup with Richmond, the Spiders, and then we have number 9 seed Georgia Tech. I'm going to go with a slight upset here, go with Georgia Tech out of the ACC. It's definitely going to be a great game out there in Los Angeles, but I am going to go with Georgia Tech. Now let's move on to our first 5 and 12 matchup. You have Ole Miss out of the SEC and Ball State from the MAC. I definitely could see Ball State pulling off this upset, but Ole Miss has definitely had some quality wins down the stretch. They beat LSU down the stretch, even without Flau'jae Johnson in the lineup. Ole Miss definitely has a strong team that could definitely make some noise in this field. Moving on to the number 4 seed Baylor out of the Big 12 and Grand Canyon, who had a regular season record of 30-2. They won their respective conference tournament. And Grand Canyon, one of those teams that I could definitely see pull off this 13-4 against Baylor. And let's get a little crazy. Go with Grand Canyon pulling off the upset against Baylor. It's more than likely not going to happen, but you know what? It's March Madness, so let's go ahead and pull off Grand Canyon, shocker in Waco. So give me Grand Canyon, the Lopes, to pull off a shocker in the first round. Now let's move on to the Baton Rouge Regional, where we have number 6 seed Florida State and number 11 seed George Mason. George Mason, what a story for them out of the eight. But Florida State, a lot of star power on this team. And just keep in mind, a difference between the women's and men's. If you are a top 4 seed, you do get to host. It's not like the men's tournament where they have, like, for example, Auburn's going to be playing in Lexington and so on and so forth. So that's just a little bit of discrepancy between the women's and men's tournament. So now let's move on to number 3 seed LSU and number 14 seed San Diego State. San Diego State, the champs out of the Mountain West. LSU has definitely been dealing with some injuries down the stretch from Anissa Moro and Flau'jae Johnson, but I will be going with the Tigers, especially at home, to pull this one out against the Aztecs. Moving on now to 7 seed Michigan State and number 10 seed Harvard, both experienced teams, but I am going to go with Harvard, actually, in this 10-7 upset. So give me Harvard, the Ivy League champs. So give me Harvard. So now we have the number 2 seed NC State and number 15 seed Vermont. I am going to go with NC State. This was an NC State team that started off the season slow, but this team has really caught fire down the stretch. They did get outed in the ACC tournament, but this is a team that could definitely see go deep. So now let's go on now to Regional 4, I believe. Yes, that is. So if the number 1 seed in this field is USC, they get to face off against number 16 seed UNC Greensboro. I don't see USC having really too much trouble in that one. Number 8 seed California, number 9 seed Mississippi State. I am going to go with Cal. Cal is one of the hottest teams in all women's basketball, so give me Cal. So now let's move on to the number 5 seed Kansas State and number 12 seed Fairfield. Fairfield, definitely one of those teams that could pull off an upset, but I just don't really see it here with Kansas State. So give me Kansas State. And now let's move on to the 4 and the 13 with Kentucky and Liberty. What a job by Kentucky this season in a loaded SEC. But I am going to go with Georgia A. Moore in Kentucky to move on here. And now let's move on to the 6 seed Iowa and number 11 seed Murray State. I am going to go with Iowa here in this matchup between the 6 and 11 seed. And then we go on now to the number 3 and the 14 seed Florida Gulf Coast. definitely a dangerous number 14 seed to deal with here, but Oklahoma has really been playing well down the stretch there after a slow start out of the gates there in the SEC. Then we see a number 7 seed Oklahoma State and number 10 seed South Dakota State. Going to be a fantastic game in Storrs, Connecticut, but I am going to go with Oklahoma State. The Cowgirls moving on there to the second round. And then we see our final matchup here in the first round of Regional 4. Number 2 seed UConn and the champs out of the Sun Belt, Arkansas State. Arkansas State's first time in the dance. So to the Red Wolves, but a tough draw for them as they do get UConn, who's just been an absolute force this season. Now let's move on to Regional 2, where we have the defending champs, the South Carolina Gamecocks. They're going to be facing off against number 16 seed Tennessee Tech. I don't see this one being close, so give me South Carolina, especially at home. And then we see number 8 seed Utah, number 9 seed Indiana. I do not see an upset here, as I am going to go with Utah winning that one. Now let's go on to number 5 seed Alabama, number 12 seed Green Bay. Green Bay is known in the past to be a real team. They feel like it's been a lot of tournament appearances in the past, but I'm going to go with number 5 seed Alabama. They could definitely be a dangerous 5 seed moving forward. Now let's move on to number 4 seed Maryland, number 13 seed Norfolk State. I feel like Norfolk State is going to be a trendy pick, but I don't see it here in College Park as I have the Terps moving on to face off against Alabama in the second round. Now we have number 6 seed West Virginia, number 11 seed Columbia and Washington. So Columbia and Washington will both be playing in the first 4 game. I will be going with Columbia to win that game, but I just don't think that anybody's going to beat West Virginia in this matchup. So give me West Virginia. Now we have number 3 seed North Carolina and the champs from the Pac-12. Or the Mountain West in this case. It would be Oregon State. I'm not quite sure. If you're in the comments, correct me if I'm wrong. But I'm going to go with North Carolina to pull this one out against Oregon State. And then number 7 seed Vanderbilt and number 10 seed Oregon. I will be going with the Commodores to beat the Ducks in this matchup. And then we see number 2 seed Duke and number 15 seed Lehigh. Duke just won the conference tournament. And I will be going with the Blue Devils to move on to face off against Vanderbilt. Now let's move on to our final region, which features the number 1 seed, the Texas Longhorns in Regional 3. They'll get the winner of High Point and William and Mary. I will be going with High Point, but I think that Texas will be moving on here. Then we have number 8 seed Illinois and number 9 seed Creighton. I'm going to go with another 9 seed, go with the Creighton Blue Jays. So let's go with Creighton from the Big East. And then we see number 5 seed Tennessee, number 12 seed South Florida. South Florida, another dangerous team. And you know what? Let's pull off a 12/5. I am going to go with South Florida to pull this one out against Tennessee. So that's our another double-digit seed that we have advancing on there. So give me South Florida. Then we have number 4 seed Ohio State and number 13 seed State. I will be going with Ohio State there. Then we have number 6 seed Michigan facing off. I believe that this is Iowa State and Princeton in that matchup. I will be going with Iowa State, but I think that Michigan will just be too much for the winner of that game. And then we have number 3 seed Notre Dame facing off against number 14 seed Stephen F. Austin. Notre Dame, it's definitely crazy to see them as the number 3 seed, as just a couple of weeks back they were the number 1 team in the country. So this is definitely a dangerous number 3 seed in this tournament. Then we have number 7 seed Louisville facing off against number 10 seed Nebraska. Going to be a great game in Fort Worth, but I'm going to be going with Louisville. And then we have number 2 seed TCU and number 15 seed Fairleigh Dickinson. I will be going with TCU, as we'll have Haley Van Lith against her former team. So that is our first round matchups. Now let's go back to Regional 1, where we will start off our matchups. First up, we have number 1 seed UCLA off against number 9 seed Georgia Tech. I will be going with UCLA, so all of the 1 seeds advancing so far. Then we have number 5 seed Ole Miss and number 13 seed Grand Canyon. I would love to see the Lopes pull off a Cinderella story, but I'm actually going to go with Ole Miss here in this matchup. They're always a dangerous team to deal with in the NCAA tournament. A couple of years back, they beat number 1 seed Stanford and made a deep run. I could see the same here for Ole Miss. Then we have number 6 seed Florida State and number 3 seed LSU. Florida State, a dangerous team out of the ACC, but I think the home crowd will help LSU. And as long as LSU is healthy, I think that the Tigers could definitely make a deep run. And then we see number 10 seed Harvard and number 2 seed NC State. So even with all the chaos we had in this region, I will be going with the top 4 seeds advancing on there. So give me NC State. Now let's go on to Regional 4. We have USC and Cal, a West Coast battle, but I'm going to go with USC. Too much Trojans on that. So then we have number 5 seed Kansas State, number 4 seed Kentucky. I will be going with Kentucky to move on there to set up USC and Kentucky in the Sweet 16. And now let's move on to number 6 seed Iowa, number 3 seed Oklahoma. Going to go with a minor upset. I am going to go with the Hawkeyes there to pull that one off. Nothing against Oklahoma, but I just think that there's going to be a couple of upsets every now and then in this tournament. And then I'm going to go with number 7 seed Oklahoma State, number 2 seed UConn. Give me the Connecticut Huskies to move on there to the Sweet 16 and set up a date with Iowa. So now let's move on back up to the Regional 2, that is number 1 seed South Carolina, number 8 seed Utah. Don't see a problem there. I will be going with South Carolina. And then Alabama and Maryland. Once again, I just think that the home crowd advantage is going to help the home team here with Maryland. Alabama is a wonderful team. They have some big wins down the stretch, but I'm going to go with Maryland to pull this one off. And then we have West Virginia and North Carolina. I definitely think that either or could win this game, but I am going to go with the Tar Heels advancing on there. And number 7 seed Vanderbilt, number 2 seed Duke, and I will be setting up a North Carolina-Duke rivalry game here in the Sweet 16. So now let's move on down to the final regional here, where we have Regional 3, where we have number 1 seed Texas and number 9 seed Creighton. We'll be going with Texas to move on there to the Sweet 16. And then we have number 12 seed South Florida versus number 4 seed Ohio State. I will be going with the Buckeyes to move on there and face off against Texas. And then we have number 6 seed Michigan and number 3 seed Notre Dame. Another fantastic matchup, but I will be going with the Fighting Irish there. And then we have number 7 seed Louisville versus number 2 seed TCU. I will be going with TCU to advance there to set up Notre Dame and TCU. Now let's go on to our Sweet 16 matchups. First in Regional 1, we have UCLA, the 1 seed versus number 5 seed Ole Miss, and I have UCLA advancing on there to the Elite 8. And then we had number 3 seed LSU, number 2 seed NC State. We did see the same matchup in the Bahamas. LSU won that matchup. And I think that the Tigers will go 2-0 against NC State. So give me LSU, the 3 seed there. So now let's move on down to Regional 4. We have number 1 seed USC, number 4 seed Kentucky. If George Amore is hot in this game, I definitely think that Kentucky could give a run for their money. But too much Juju Watkins in USC in this matchup. So give me the Trojans. And then we have number 6 seed Iowa versus number 2 seed UConn. I will be going with UConn to advance on there. So now let's go on back up to Regional 2, where we have number 1 seed South Carolina, number 4 seed Maryland. Don't see any troubles there for South Carolina. And then I have Duke, the number 2 seed, advancing on there. So we have South Carolina and Duke in that Elite 8 matchup. Now we have number 1 seed Texas and number 4 seed Ohio State. I have pretty much all the number 1 seeds surviving and advancing on to the Elite 8, so no major upsets there. And then we have number 3 seed Notre Dame, number 2 seed TCU, 2 talented teams. But give me a slight upset. I am going to go with Notre Dame to move on there and go on to the Elite 8. Now we have our Elite 8 matchups. Our first one is number 1 seed UCLA and number 3 seed LSU. These two teams actually faced off in last year's tournament. LSU ending up winning that one. This is going to be a tight, close battle. Let's go with a shocker here with number 3 seed LSU punching their ticket to the Final Four. We'll stay up here in this region with number 1 seed South Carolina and number 2 seed Duke. I think that Duke has been an incredible team, but South Carolina is just hard for me to really not see them in the Final Four this year. So give me the Gamecocks. So now let's move on to number 1 seed USC, number 2 seed UConn. Probably going to be the game of the tournament if we do get this. And I'm actually going to go with Paige Beckers in UConn to pull this one off against USC. Now we have number 1 seed Texas and number 3 seed Notre Dame. I have another number 1 seed falling, as I have number 3 seed Notre Dame making it to the Final Four. So we only have only one seed here with number 1 seed South Carolina. We have 2 number 3 seeds with LSU and Notre Dame, and then we have number 2 seed with UConn. So first matchup in Tampa in the Final Four is number 3 seed LSU and number 2 seed UConn. Going to be a great game. 2 really good head coaches with Kim Mulkey and Gino Auriemma. But I am going to go with UConn to move on to that. And then let's go to number 1 seed South Carolina and number 3 seed Notre Dame. I will be going with Notre Dame, not Notre Dame in that matchup. I meant to go with South Carolina. And now let's move on to the national championship. Number 2 seed UConn and number 1 seed South Carolina. UConn was an absolute problem for South Carolina the last time that these two teams faced off. But this time I will be having South getting their revenge, as I have the Gamecocks going back-to-back and winning another national championship. So that is my picks. Let me know who you have making it to the women's Final Four and ultimately cutting down the nets in Tampa, Florida. So I appreciate everybody for tuning into today's video, and I will catch you all next time. So long for now.